Malcolm Nance, our speaker today. 20-year veteran of the U.S. intelligence community's program on combating terrorism. He's been a Middle East policy advisor to the U.S. and international governments on special operations, Homeland Security, and intelligence. I'm so happy to call him a friend. A career U.S. Navy terrorism intelligence collector, code breaker, interrogator with wide-ranging field and combat experience in the Middle East, Southwest Asia, and Africa. Mr. Nance is MSNBC's terrorism analyst and a breaking news around the world correspondent on other media outlets. Everybody, please join me in welcoming our guest speaker, Malcolm Nance.
First, is there a guy named Mike O'Neill here? Oh, my best man from my wedding is supposed to show up today, and I haven't seen him in 10 years. He's going to come slinking in the middle of it, I know that. But he actually saw my photograph in the metro on the floor and took a photograph of it when I was living in the Middle East. And it was a Spy Museum advertisement, and that's the only way I could get him here. So that being said, I'm very happy to have you here today. I have a lot of good fans, all of whom seem to be sitting at my table, all right, and then some other fans. But most importantly, I'm glad that we're here doing this at the Spy Museum, because anyone that knows, that has ever seen me here and who works here or is on the board knows I am an extremely enthusiastic member of the museum. I love the Spy Museum. The funny thing is, I was doing programs here for like 2 or 3 years, and in one day I said, is it possible I could actually go through the museum? And, I mean, literally was doing like a dozen programs, and they were like, what, you've never been inside? And I go, no, what do you got? and they let me inside, and I just could not believe the things that are inside this building. There are artifacts here which were only legend to me in members of the intelligence community. I started out in naval intelligence in cryptology as a code breaker. And if you come through the door downstairs, you'll see in the German pavilion that they have in the glass, they have an Enigma machine, which was the single most greatest act of code breaking, quite possibly in history. And they've got one downstairs, all right? I was at NSA. It took me years before I could run into where they had the Enigma machines. Now they have them in a museum, but I saw one here first. So this place is truly amazing. And Keith Melton, as she mentioned before, the donor to virtually everything that's in this building, is just an amazing character. He has Washington's letter, which enacted the Culper spy ring, which, if you've seen the TV show Turn, is the original spy ring of the American Revolution. Where did he get that? I mean, where does he get that money? And it seems that he runs another museum, which is classified in a building across the Potomac. So it's just absolutely amazing. Every time I come here, I am overwhelmed at not just what I find here, but really the generosity and of the staff and the board members, all of whom I consider family. And this museum is truly a place that I consider a home to myself and for my wife. So with that being said, not only am I going to give our speech, but I will tell you, none of you will leave without signing up for membership to this museum. That's an order. Because it's not just that you get awesome discounts. Like today, you get 20% off in the gift shop, which is the single greatest gift shop in this city. I went to a DC party here a few weeks ago. I had to come down from New York, and I couldn't figure out, do I bring wine? Do I bring champagne? And I was like, I'm going to the museum gift shop. And I found they have these 6-packs of orange drink called Leninade, right? So I bought that. I brought coffee mugs. I was very popular at that dinner when it was over and done with. So I welcome you to my home and with my brother and sisters of the intelligence community who are here all with my family. Now, let's talk about what you really want to talk about. You want to hear. I did write this book, The Plot to Hack America, And it's interesting because the best week of sales was the last 2 weeks. I wrote this book. It actually started it on July 25th. I finished it on September 2nd. It went through editing and was put on the online version on Kindle on September 23rd, 2016. Interestingly enough, at the exact same time, the CIA was writing a report which closely resembles this book. And they turned it into the president on September 23rd. So, you know, media people ask me all the time, they go, why, how could you get this out that fast? Why could you see this in situations other people couldn't? It's simple. I'm not a journalist. People see me on television. I'm not a journalist. I'm a former intelligence officer, a former intelligence collector who comments on things in the media. So I'm not part of the media machine. I'm just one of the bubbles, right, that they produce. That's why when I saw what I thought was a very deep pattern of suspicious activities, which led to, or which encompassed the hacking and led to my conclusion in this book that the Russians were carrying out a massive cyber warfare operation against the United States. That is why it tracked precisely with the analysis of the CIA. Except that I had to use OSINT, right? I had to use open source intelligence. They got to use the full might and collection strength of the United States government. We came to the exact same conclusions on the exact same day. Because I'm not a journalist. And if I was a journalist, you notice there are no other books written thus far about this hacking. And that's not because, you know, because have more foresight. It's because journalists think completely different as those of us who are members of, or former members of the intelligence community. And that's why I could see this operation much more clearly than the press. In fact, I was the first person in the news media on the morning of July 25th. I finally convinced NBC that this was not just WikiLeaks releasing information that was hacked, that this was a national security emergency, that the United States itself was under attack by a hostile government through the machinations of its hostile intelligence agency, what used to be known as Oleg Kalugin's former organization, the KGB, now as the FSB. And that's how I managed to put this out. Now, you notice I put a question mark after tried in my little headline here. How Putins Cyberspies and WikiLeaks tried, maybe, to steal the 2016 election. You know, every day I'm told by people, no, they didn't try, they did. One thing I want to say right off the bat, because I get asked this question every day. The election results, which I feared was going to be the ultimate hack carried out by the Russians, did not occur. There is no evidence right now that they actually they hacked into voting machines, changed the ballots. My concern, if you read the last chapter, will say the red line is if they actually go to, not the voting machines themselves, those are very hard to hack. If they hack the tallies that are done by the states, right, which are just a laptop, they could be done on a chalkboard as each county sends in its numbers. That is where they had the capacity to do real damage. Now, I'm not alone in that assessment because the first week of October, the president of the United States at that time, Barack Obama, believed that that is where they were going. And he called Russia, he called the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, on the emergency red phone in the White House, which is supposed to be used for international crises or to stave off atomic war. And he warned Russia, whatever you've done, draw a line on it right now. There will be no further interference in our election, and you will not hack or interfere on election day. It didn't matter. Because as we're going to find out, as I'm going to discuss here, and I said this just last night on television on NBC, the votes weren't hacked in this election. What was hacked was the American people were hacked. Your mindset was hacked. Your opinion was hacked. What you believed was reality was hacked. And as my esteemed peer from the FBI, Dave Major, the counterintelligence officer, said to me just earlier today, he said, this is a Russian active measure. This is what they do. They don't stop just because they've shifted their colors or their ideology. This is a day-to-day activity. And now we have since learned that Russian hacking operations, Russian cyber warfare operations, Russian hybrid warfare, which is a combination of political, cyber, military operations, they do these things like we butter our bread. When the National Security Agency does a cyber operation against you, if they're going to hack you and put in a virus, you're eventually not going to know it. But at some point, you're going to eventually know it, but you're not going to know it initially. NSA crafts viruses and hacking tools like a fine sniper bullet, right? They balance out the shell. They use some exclusive titanium material. They hand carve the bullet and machine it down to the nth degree. And they take a custom-made casing and they fill it in with 1 drop of grain, propellant. And then they only make 5 of them. And then they shoot 3 of them as a test bed. And they take 2 bullets out. And when they want to hit their target, they shoot once. And then you don't even know you're dead, right? That's how we do cyber warfare operations. The Russians do cyber warfare operations the way you pick up a glass and drink water. It is an integral part of their activities in the world. And the most interesting component of that is called compromat, which means to compromise you through some demeaning, degrading, or information that is embarrassing in order to either knock you down, knock you off guard, or to throw you into chaos for their advantage. And that's exactly what my book is. I have written not a novel. I didn't write a history. I wrote an intelligence assessment of how we got to the point and how the Russians would have carried out this operation. A lot of people say, oh my God, this is a great political book. It's not a great political book. I wish to God I didn't have to write it. What it is this is, from my perspective, written real time as it was occurring, how we got to the point where the United States population and electorate's opinion was hacked. Now, I'm going to give you a quick history while I go through here so that I don't completely dominate that slide. So, like I said, this nation, a foreign intelligence agency, attacked this nation with a cyber warfare operation. A lot of people out there, especially the people I fight with on the internet, the Wikileaks people, they love to come and tell me, no, it wasn't a hacking, nothing was hacked. Somebody at the DNC took all that information, tens of thousands of emails and thousands of voicemails and all the donor records and gave it to Julian Assange at Wikileaks. That is not what happened, all right? The beautiful part is, when I saw on the morning of July 25th, the chaos that was being wreaked at the Democratic National Committee convention in Philadelphia, which I was there. As a matter of fact, NBC does this little trick because I'm the terrorism analyst. They never put me where all the fun things are. They didn't put me down at the stadium with everybody else. They kept me at Independence Hall, which is about 5 miles from the action, right? Because what if there's a terrorist attack, right? We need terrorism guy someplace where he's not going to get killed and he can report on what's happening. So it's awful the way they treat me at NBC. And the funny thing is, prior to this election, if you ever saw me on television next to Brian Williams, it was bad, right? Our nickname is the Doom Brothers because it's like Brian Williams has some serious, grave information to pass on, and Malcolm Nance is going to explain how bad it is, all right? So that was my job until this hacking occurred. But this nation was attacked. In the morning of the 25th, I spent all Sunday, the 24th, trying to convince NBC executives that this was not just a release of information, that this was a massive cyber warfare operation against the electorate and people of the United States. And for the first time in 240 years, a foreign nation had successfully influenced the mindset of the American public. And I'm often challenged on that. But by God, this nation was attacked. And don't believe me, there was a concurrence of all 17 U.S. intelligence agencies that's the exact same thing that occurred. The President of the United States made an address on October 9th saying the exact same thing with the Director of National Intelligence, the Director of CIA, and the Director of Homeland Security. Unfortunately, that was the day that the Billy Bush grab him by the you-know-what video came out, so no one heard the President's address, right? Except maybe all the watch officers standing duty, right, around the world. But that's what was going on. The American public sort of missed that the President of the United States announced that we were attacked by a foreign nation. And when it did gain traction, it was ignored in many quarters. But that's exactly what occurred. Interesting component of this is I have an entire chapter in my book labeled Watergate 2.0. If you remember in 1973, operatives at the behest of the Republican National Committee and the White House, Richard Nixon, hired people to break into the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee at the Watergate Hotel, right down on the waterfront, right? What they did was they went in to steal files, plant bugs, and to learn the inner machinations of the Democratic National Committee. So they got caught because a door was left open leading to the car park, and a semi-alert security guard pulled that door closed, which blocked off their escape route, and then saw lights inside the room and found these people breaking into the files and trying to put in bugs in there. But today, that's exactly what the Russians did. For 10 months, they were inside using cyber hacking tools, and they stayed inside the servers of the Democratic National Committee, and they stole every document in there. I've spoken to Donna Brazil, the acting director of the DNC. You want to talk about a person that is cyber aware now? She said everybody at the DNC has a copy of your book, right? We understand we were attacked. And they not only stole all the emails, every voicemail that was left in the building was copied. They were digital. Every donor and all of the donors' personal information to the Democratic National Committee, including mine, I made a phone donation, they were stolen. All of the materials that they had and were transferring to each other via real-time chat were monitored. They were monitoring every chat between DNC staff. Now, don't tell me that there is a 400-pound fat kid in his basement that is going to go there and say, well, I've got 300,000 emails. I'm going to process these in less than a couple of weeks and then select the right ones and bring them out. There have been other incidents that have occurred besides the release of this information. There have been several cases of where the credit card information of donors were hacked and were tried to be used for charges. And we think that those were just test beds. The purpose of that part of the hacking was to erode the confidence in the security of giving money to the Democratic Party. Then we later learned that not only was the DNC hacked, the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, was hacked as well. They put up a false website so that people from the DCCC would accidentally go to that website and put in their login credentials, and they stole that. That's called typo squatting. Not only that, anyone that donated to the DCCC through that website gave up their real credit card information to the people that conducted the hacking. So Malcolm, who conducted this hacking? Well, as it says up there, Russian intelligence agency, the State Security Committee, the FSB, its clandestine service, the SVR, and Russian military intelligence, the GRU, and its version of NSA, which is known as the SCIS, carried out this hacking. Why? Why not? It's an active measure. It degrades the United States, and it's there. Now, people always ask me every day, well, how do you know? What makes you so sure, right? This is my favorite one. There's no evidence that there was any hacking. Don't believe a word I say, right? Why would you believe some old spy? Don't believe the United States government. Why do all those tens of thousands of people come up and lie to you every day? This is what people tell me. Why would you believe? And the funny part is, why would you not believe the people that protect you every day about this, but you'll believe them about ISIS and Al-Qaeda, right? What, they want to keep you alive from terrorists so they can lie to you about a hacking? Not quite sure where that logic line comes from. There was a company called CrowdStrike that was brought into the Democratic National Committee at the time of the hacking. This was in March 2016. Their analysts realized that there was something going on in the servers of the DNC. So they brought in a counter-hacking team. This team did not just start plugging holes. They followed and monitored the hack while it was going on in real time. I've met Dmitry Operovich, the CEO of CrowdStrike, and he said we were sitting there on computers, everybody watching the files get transferred one at a time, and then watching them erase their footprints. And these servers, we were watching where these servers were. And they were in Russia, in servers related to the FSB and the GRU. And we had seen these fingerprints before. And they referred to these fingerprints, the malware packages. Think of them like cruise missile systems that instead of exploding when they arrive at their target, they settle into their target and they set up a line of communication back to Russia. And these are called Advanced Persistent Threat Number 28, nicknamed by CrowdStrike Fancy Bear, which belonged to the FSB, and Advanced Persistent Threat 29, nicknamed Cozy Bear, which belonged to Russian military intelligence, the GRU. Now, interestingly enough, there are other bears out there. I collectively refer to all Russian cyber operations as cyber bears. But there is a criminal organizations who subcontract for the Kremlin. I refer to them as criminal bears. Then there are militias of pro-Russian hackers, sort of gray hat type people who work the Russian version of Anonymous. We refer to them as militia bears. And they just do it because they love Russia, and they get together as these little cyber militias. The thing that I want to point out about Cozy Bear and Fancy Bear is they've been seen before. Not only did they conduct the DNC hack and were monitored real time by cyber professionals that were subcontractors, not even NSA. Of course, NSA was monitoring them. But you can go read right now, Google CrowdStrike, DNC hack, and you can read the official report that was released to the DNC in June of 2016 that had nothing to do with the United States government. Interestingly enough, these two entities had been seen not just once, but numerous times before. 1 year before, ATP-29, right, Cozy Bear, the Russian military intelligence malware package, had been seen seizing control of 3 Ukrainian power plants. These power plants were Russian-built. They were done with Russian software. And one day, one after another, someone physically took control of the power plants. The operators said they were banging on their keyboards, but they realized someone who actually knew how to run these power plants was there making all the correct keystrokes in front of them. While they were literally trying to pull the plug on their laptops, nothing stopped it. They shut down 3 power plants, cutting out power for 250,000 people. Now, the only way that that could be done is if someone had a mirror image console of that power plant and was connected to your electronic systems, your distribution systems and control systems, and cut you off, and then they start playing with your buttons. And the only people who could do that were people who were from Russia that built the power plant, right? Russia, they believed that the Russians did this to cover for a special activity or some special operation that required all the power out in that part of the Ukraine. They still don't know to this day why those corridors of power plants were shut down. But it was also Russia showing, we can shut off all your power while you sit at your desk. Think about how serious that would be. Shutting off a power plant kills people. If anybody's ever been to a hospital recently, if you don't have a generator with enough oil, you shut the power off there. Neonatal goes off. Life support systems goes off. Lights in surgery go off. You will kill people. So when ATP-29 wormed its way into those 3 power plants, it was essentially, in any other country, that would have been an act of war. ATP-28 was seen hacking into TV France 5's servers. And an interesting component about that is they left markers in there making people believe it was ISIS carrying out that hack. They put up ISIS banners and ISIS graffiti. But in fact, they were planting malware into the servers so that they could copy everything French television was going to say inside their servers. And another thing, they also, soon after that, ATP-28 hacked into the German parliament. Each time they did this, they left the digital footprints that led back to what are known as the C2 servers, the command and control servers. Those servers all led back to known Russian military and FSB intelligence facilities. So there is ample evidence. Now, that's just what the civilians came up with. All right? For anybody who knows the awesome power of Fort Meade at NSA, where I worked for a time, they know everything. They're just not going to tell you. Right? They're not going to put out a report. They were reporting to the commander of Cyber Command. They were reporting to the director of national intelligence and the president of the United States. And there is definitive information. How do I know there's definitive information? The president of the United States would not come out and make a public statement saying we have evidence that Russia is conducting a cyber warfare operation against the United States unless it was high confidence, which is 90% or higher. So that's how we know these entities were out there. Interesting thing about it, since that hack has occurred, we have found that ATP-28 and ATP-29 are presently hacking the servers of the Dutch parliament, the servers of German political parties, and are operating just recently against a guy by the name of Philippe Macron, who is the underdog, but a guy who is the Bernie Sanders of France. Russia has been carrying out these operations because they intend to degrade Western democracy. And they use the exact same malware suites. And at this point, I don't think they care whether we know. Because apparently, they've determined that they can hack people's mindsets and beliefs well enough to decide an election. But before I get into that, let's move on. So what we saw occur here was simply this. It was Watergate 2.0, only a successful Watergate. Because unlike the first time, they didn't get caught. They didn't get caught until they went away with everything and then released that information. So the next big question that I get asked is, okay, so the Russians did it. But why does my boy Julian Assange, why are you going to badmouth him like that? All right. You have no idea. The only hate mail I get, or mail that really questions me like, oh, how do you know, is when it's from the Wikileaks people, right? Julian and Assange and Wikileaks started out as a global transparency movement to bring information out to the masses and to take away from the government their veil of secrecy. Yay. The first time they did it by enticing a young man by the name of Chelsea Manning, now a young woman by the name of Chelsea Manning, they managed to steal 850,000 or more classified documents off of our Intel link, which is our internal intelligence program, and put it out to the world of U.S. operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, and worldwide. Diplomatic cables, military communiques, operations and activities, and that launched WikiLeaks into the stratosphere as this supposedly lovely, helpful government transparency organization. Soon afterwards, Julian Assange was brought up on charges or accused of carrying out a rape while he was meeting with some of his followers in Sweden. He denied those charges, fled Sweden, went to England, and the English were about to extradite him back to Sweden on what he believed were trumped-up charges, and he went to the Ecuadorian embassy and asked for asylum. The Ecuadorians said, yes, you can have asylum. The British said, yeah, you can have asylum, but you can't leave that building. Because you have asylum, and it only goes as far as that one room that you're in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. And that's where he's been for the last 6 or so years, in a form of, how can I put it, British-imposed house arrest. The moment he walks out that front door, they're going to arrest him. He knows that, which is why he carries out all his activities on the inside. But more interesting is he blames Hillary Clinton for getting him into that situation because she was Secretary of State. He believed that she had malice towards him because of the WikiLeaks leak, and she engineered this rape charge that he was being accused of while in Sweden. So, interesting component of this. When all of the hacking occurred at the DNC, within 2 months, an entity popped up called Guccifer 2.0. Guccifer 2.0 claimed to have been a Romanian hacker who had all the information from the DNC and wanted to leak it to the news media. Now, this is interesting because there was a hacker known as Guccifer, but that Guccifer had already been arrested by the FBI for hacking into Colin Powell's emails. He was Romanian. He was in the United States in prison and cooperating with the FBI already. This new entity, Guccifer 2.0, said he was Romanian too, but couldn't speak Romanian. And finally, again, it doesn't take the FBI or NSA to do this. We have brilliant cybersecurity professionals out there. And someone realized that this person was working based on his keystrokes and the way that he wrote things on a split keyboard, Cyrillic keyboard that is only used in Russia. And so they started querying him in Romanian very fast. And it would take him like 2 to 3 minutes, like he was getting up, using Google Translate, which it turned out he was. Because they said some of the journalists who spoke to him would put it backwards through Google Translate, and his bad Romanian was coming out in perfect Russian. So they realized this was just a front entity being used by the FSB to leak this information. As that became known, information started to leak out a little bit later in late July that Julian Assange claimed that he had all of the DNC emails. Now, it is possible that some private hacking group got into those emails and could have done that. But it is impossible that they would have left the fingerprints of Russian intelligence material going back to KGB, or KBG, there I go, FSB, GRU servers in the physical buildings that belong to them, right? And if that's the case, that means every one of those other hacks, hacks in Estonia, hacks in Georgia, hacks in Lithuania, hacks in Germany, hacks in France, hacks in Britain, would also had to have been that same fat 400-pound kid in a basement, right? And I mean, that's an adventuresome kid. And it's interesting, all his hacking only seemed to benefit Russian intelligence. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Now, granted, people want people to think that, but Occam's razor, right? The simplest answer is always the truth. The Russians did it themselves. And there's no reason to have to come up with a fancy excuse. But I believe, and I write this in my book, that I've been involved in political warfare operations, military warfare operations. It takes a lot of people to analyze tens of thousands of emails. Because even if you put in an algorithm that says, get me every email that says, Bernie Sanders, if anybody here has studied foreign languages, all decrypts come out to a foreign language, and in this case, English. So someone is going to have to read all those Bernie Sanders related emails. It might be Bernie Sanders had his 74th birthday. Let's send him a bunch of flowers. That's not a good email. They wanted emails which would do damage. But to do damage, you would have to have emails that show some nefarious link. And if you read the DNC emails, here's the nefarious link that they found. All of Hillary Clinton's friends want her to be president. It's like, what? When I read them, I was like, okay, where's the murder? Okay, I mean, I wore the headphones for a very long time, okay, in my career. I know what it's like to be the third party on a conversation. And when you have both sides of a conversation, it's awesome. But in this case, okay, tell me something we didn't know. The only place that that would be valuable is if you needed to put a wedge between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. And the morning of 23 July, WikiLeaks announced that they had explosive emails which were going to put a knife into Hillary Clinton's back. Now, that's fine, but why would Julian Assange strictly be going after Hillary Clinton? Well, of course, because he thinks he put her into that Ecuadorian embassy and can't get out because of her. And he also said in an interview in June that he has an abject hate, absolute hatred for Hillary Clinton, which, when all of these emails suddenly fell off of a truck in front of his embassy, I guess, or were FedExed to that 400-pound fat kid, he found somehow, by sorting through tens of thousands of emails, the 3 or 4 precise emails which would split the Democratic Party in half. And that's precisely what that email release did. The morning of the first Democratic National Convention, this is Philadelphia in Roosevelt Park outside of the DNC, just hours after the WikiLeaks emails were released, showing that the director of the Democratic National Committee wanted Hillary Clinton to be president. Well, she was best friends with Hillary Clinton. Everyone knew she wanted Hillary Clinton to be president. And now, though, this was documentary proof that they had cheated and stole the election from Bernie Sanders. Considering he lost by 2 million votes, 5 emails does not prove cheating. But it doesn't matter. It was a matter of perception management, right? What was getting hacked here was the narrative that was framing Hillary Clinton. And it's unfortunate I don't have it on a slide. I really wish that I had bought this slide. There is 2 word clouds of the election, of media coverage, one of Donald Trump, one of Hillary Clinton. The largest word in Donald Trump was speeches, followed by Mexico, followed by immigration. And they were medium-sized words. You've seen in a word cloud, right? If you look at Hillary Clinton's, it's one word. One giant word down the middle, emails. And when you really look at it objectively, you had a, 68-year-old lady that didn't know how to use email, right? I mean, really, look at it. Where is the nefarious crime that supposedly occurred? Top secret information? I took a look at some of these emails. I've handled classified. Everybody in this room who's a professional has handled classified. Have any of you had 350 people carbon copied on your email? I've never. I had more than 2, 3, maybe 5 offices who may have been in receipt. These emails were replies, and some of them had what was unclassified State Department material with the letter C, the confidential marker on it, because before it's released to the public, it's confidential, but it's essentially unclassified. And in the middle of them, those were sent by people who were in that 350-person chain. No one is going to go reading all the way down if you're Secretary of State and go, let me see, is there a C in there? Is there a TS in there? Everybody looks for TS. Everybody looks for S, the secret, right? How many of you really look for confidential? And there's like 100 unclassified markers in there. That is essentially the thing. And that's what people believe the email scandal was about. But with Russian assistance, the email scandal became much bigger than that. They gave them emails. Every email the DNC had. But I want to point something out. From the Democratic National Committee, guess what you did not see an email? Who you did not see an email from? There were no Hillary Clinton emails in the DNC. So, like any good intelligence operation, you really want something that's closer to the bone. So what they did is they hacked the email of a good friend of hers, John Podesta. Now, as a SIGINter, as a signals intelligence guy, I can tell you something. If you can't get to your target, get to your target's wife, get to your target's friend, and you can get the one side of that conversation. And they did. And I read all of those emails as they were coming through, what was called, right, Podesta leaks or whatever. That was also considered, according to U.S. intelligence, a Russian entity that was leaking that information. The best thing I got out of that was the risotto recipe. I'm not joking. I read those and I was like, I'm looking for something. And I'm like, the actual news was he got hacked. That was it. There was nothing in there. But while you're sifting through thousands of emails, including a freaking risotto recipe, the word emails is out there. And it was the bright, shiny object the news media couldn't resist. Couldn't resist it. So if you were to go through all those emails today, now that the election is over, you would be very hard-pressed to find anything that would change your vote. But if you were to manage the perception of what Hillary Clinton's greatest flaw was, which prior to that was that she had a private email server. And to this day, not one email from that server has shown up anywhere. They did not hack that server. It was physically secure. Obviously, it was more secure than the State Department servers. All right? Look, this isn't politics. All right? This is signals intelligence, cyber warfare, and intelligence analysis. It's just as plain and as simple as that. And that's why the President of the United States was not worried about emails. He was worried about the greater issue, which is the United States electorate. One side of our two-party system was hacked to the benefit of the other side. Now, those of us who are sneaky, we like to think, that's funny. And I don't mean funny ha-ha, I mean funny ho-ho. Why would they do that? Right? Give them the big Whiskey 5 hotel. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. Why would they do that? What's the purpose behind that? That was my first question. It's like, okay, you hacked the DNC. Now, what exactly are you going to do with all that information? And I kept waiting. I kept waiting for the RNC to be hacked. Of course the RNC was hacked. Because when you have an agency, I don't care, Russian, American, French, when you have an agency the size of NSA, they will get into your private civilian systems. That's all there is to it, through hook or by crook. And before I go any further, never click on a link in an email. All right? That is the #1 way that the Russians would get into you. You would click on that link. That link will link now your computer to a server in Russia, and they will flood your computer with malware technologies you will not be able to detect. But the purpose was not only chaos amongst the Democratic National Convention, it was designed to be chaos against the United States. Anything that would create destabilization within the liberal Western democracy works for Russia. You know, Russia's not communist anymore, but they're exactly like the communists, only with new Mercedes-Benzes and atomic bombs. They're like a mafia with atomic bombs. It is an autocracy. It is essentially a dictatorship with an oligarchy of uber rich at the top, all of whom must show absolute fealty to Vladimir Putin. And what's in their way to greatness, according to them? America and the West. And what they want is they want to be allowed to do their business worldwide the way they want it. And what would be the best way to do that? 1, get the United States into chaos. 2, get somebody in the White House who thinks exactly like you do. And I'm not saying that there's anybody like that out there. All I know is on July 27th, you know, for weeks, I had been saying, man, Donald Trump, I just don't get it. I was conservative my whole life, right? Now I'm a Democrat. You know why? Because I'm a Colin Powell conservative. National security hardliner, right? Socially, sort of liberal. Why am I socially liberal? My family's been in the armed forces in every war since 1864. We have fought for this nation. Every Nance male has served in the armed forces. And the most recent, well, you know what I say? Don't thank me, thank my wife. All right? I'm not the one who had to sit back here and watch to see if I was dead in a car bombing in Baghdad. You know, my wife and my mom, and those two became like this. All right? You know you're in trouble when your wife and your mom love each other. So, but the question that just kept popping up into my mind is, why is Russia in December 2015 say Donald Trump is a brilliant and or a colorful and popular man? Well, that's interesting. Why would the president of Russia say that? Why, when we look back at those videos of Donald Trump in Russia in 2013 for Miss Universe, was like a little whiny puppy dog going, do you think Vladimir Putin will come? Do you think Vladimir Putin will like me? Because Donald Trump sees Russia as an ATM of money that he could get access to. That had been known since 1987 when he went to the Soviet Union and tried to get hotels built in Moscow and St. Petersburg. But after communism, all of those Soviet assets were liquidated, billions upon billions of dollars. That money was all coming into the New York, Tokyo, London, Paris real estate market. And Donald Trump saw that money. And you know he loves some money, right? If there is any one thing we can say about Donald Trump, he loves money. Now, he loves himself too, yeah. But for those of us in counterintelligence, there's an acronym when you want to recruit an agent. Does anybody know what it is? MICE. And the letter M in MICE, which are the 4 components you would use to recruit an agent, is money. You induce that person, right? When I was at NSA, and I won't say much more than I'm going to say right now, I was on a floor where in the next office that I could not go into, which had a cipher lock on the door, an American citizen sold out one of the highest, most classified cryptologic programs in our history for $35,000. Now, how did I know that happened? Because I came to that floor one day and half the floor had been dismantled. It was empty. All just, you know, big giant hall in which there had been a program. The Russians managed to induce him with money. And he just gave it up. What I don't understand about those kind of spies, why do you want to get money to live legally and pay your bills and your taxes through espionage? Illicit money. That's like being a drug lord so that you can pay your bills, right? I mean, you're going to commit a crime, go all the way. Right? If you're going to be a spy, go, I don't know, defect to Moscow like Snowden. But all I know is money talks. Then you have I for ideology, C for coercion or co-option, and then E is ego. Does anybody have a copy of my book? Can I see? I'm sorry, you all. That's a stupid question, right? Somebody just throw me one. There's a line I want to read that's in the prefix, but I put in here. Way back when I was a baby spy, there was a baby collector. There was a series of videos we used to watch that were really classified. I won't even tell you which classification level. But they were from a Russian defector from the Soviet Union, guy by the name of Yuri Bezmenov. Oleg, did you know this guy? No? Okay. But all of his videos about Russia, propaganda, the KGB and recruitment are now on YouTube. You can watch it. You can watch everything back then. He spoke publicly after that, right? And one of the things that I thought was fascinating was he talked about KGB recruitment strategy in that period, in the mid to late 80s. And he wrote, the KGB targeted, which now is called the FSB, they removed the border guards. The KGB targeted, quote, egocentric people who lack moral principles, who are either too greedy or who suffer from exaggerated self-importance. These are the people the KGB wants and finds easiest to recruit. Thank you. I don't believe, and I've said this on national and international television, that Donald Trump is a KGB, as an FSB agent. He's a spy for Russia. I don't believe that for 1 minute. But it is quite possible to believe that he was manipulated to be an unwitting asset by people that he did not know have nefarious purposes for why they supported him between 2013 and his run for presidency in 2015. One of the great enduring mysteries in news media, and I talked to a lot of journalists, Kurt Eichenwald at the Washington Post, Michael Schmidt at the New York Times, everybody at NBC Investigative, no one can put their finger on the moment or how Donald Trump came up with the belief that NATO is an obsolete organization that should be broken up. Nobody has come up with the point in time where he learned to believe that the European Union and economic unions and markets altogether in the world were worthless. No one came up with the point in time where he learned that globalization does not help the United States, which is interesting because we invented globalization with World War II when we produced everything in the world and then dropped it literally by parachute into those parts of the world. We invented that, right? When the Berlin Wall was thrown up and they surrounded Berlin and we had airplanes out there doing chocolate bombing runs to German kids. I mean, that's just that little Google drone, right? Amazon drone that we have out there. We technically invented Amazon.com. We, every person in this room, our legacy, our parents, fought to create a world where we could trade with everybody, with America coming out on top. The Russians don't think that way. And somehow we're under the impression that this is not good for our nation. Where did this come from? And where does it come from that Donald Trump can never, ever criticize Vladimir Putin, but can criticize every ally that we have? Every person in this room, technically, right? I mean, I've been called an enemy of America, all right? Because I'm in media. Okay. So I'm going to skip over some things. I get asked this all the time. How grave is this issue? This quote comes from Benjamin Franklin. It was about Benedict Arnold. And he said, Judas sold only one man, Benedict Arnold 3 millions. I have people asking me right now, are we going there? Are we going to Benedict Arnold territory? I don't know. All I know is that according to the New York Times, and not according to anybody I know, but according to the New York Times, at least 4 individuals in his campaign are under serious investigation right now. When I say serious, I mean serious. FBI investigation into their connections to Russian intelligence. Now, they may completely had no earthly idea. If you go to a party like this and I sign your book and you're an FSB officer, I could never know it. And that's completely innocent. It's the second contact and the third contact. We don't know what's going on. And I am with John McCain, Senator John McCain, and Senator Lindsey Graham on this. This nation was attacked. We need to know the parameters of that attack. This is not about partisanship. I voted for Ronald Reagan twice. I voted for George Herbert Walker Bush and had the honor of going into his Center for Intelligence, where my friends are on a wall. with their stars. I take this very serious. This is an issue of patriotism. And I think we need to know just exactly what happened to this nation, right? Like I said. And with that, Peter Ernst.
Michael, thank you for an absolutely terrific presentation, as always. What I'd like to do is go to, why don't you stay up here? I'd like to go to you for questions, and as the moderator, I get to ask the first one. And I will remind you that he will be in the back of the room signing books and taking additional questions at the end. So the shorter the questions, the shorter the answers, the more we can have. Let me just start with one very quick one.
Yes.
A quick comment on the so-called dossier on Trump.
Yeah. Do I have to? Jeez Louise. The dossier, you want to know about the dossier?
Quick comment.
I'm going to tell you I'll tell you all a little secret. That dossier was shown to me on October 2nd by David Corn. He called me for advice on it. He said, what do you think of this? And I was like, whoa. Where did you get this? And he told me, right? I said, this guy is trafficking in what we call rumor intelligence. I said, but the problem with rumor is it looks like, you know, those junior officer cables from State Department. I went to a party and I got told that, you know, Angelina Jolie really is, you know, not married to Brad Pitt. That's essentially what it sounded like, except that a lot of these were starting to interact with what we were learning about people in the media. Carter Page is a supposed Russian advisor for Donald Trump. I don't know anything about Carter Page other than what's been reported. Let me tell you, he's lucky I'm not in charge in counterintelligence. All right? I'd rip his life apart. He just has a lot of issues. So I think that that dossier has a lot of points to it that may be true, but we're never going to find out until there's an actual investigation.
Okay, thank you. Let me go to the VIP table for the next question.
VIPs?
And then there's a gentleman back there with his hand up. The table right here, are there any questions?
There you go.
Let me take yours.
I'll get you two.
One thing that I know they haven't addressed in the media, they talk about polling data and polling errors and about how all this information was hacked. Has anybody looked into as to whether or not there was any manipulation of the polling data that would have influenced the Democratic Party not to go to Wisconsin, Michigan, the Northern Firewall where they were really needed and the help didn't get there?
No, I don't believe that. I mean, you know, that's really in the weeds. I mean, they lost by 77,000 votes, technically in 3 counties, and they were all union voters who had voted for Obama before. They just voted for Trump, and they all admit it, right? So, boop, election over. So, no, but you have to understand, the key here was how the entire mindset of this nation about Hillary Clinton and her emails was hacked. Overly influenced, undue political influence. Did it decide the election? Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. That's for historians to conclude. Now, I think this story's going to get a lot more interesting this year. I think I'm going to be on TV all the time. All right?
Let me take one more question from the VIP table here.
So, we know a lot, right? We know a lot of what's happened.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Speak into it, yes.
Okay. The one thing that I still cannot wrap my brain around is on December 29th, we know that Michael Flynn had communications with Russia. We know he had communications about the sanctions at this point. Why would our government, knowing that we have the transcripts, that there were intercepts, why would our government not do anything about it and allow a potential asset and or agent into the White House with a top national security clearance?
Well, easy, because you would have to have proof that that person was an asset or an agent. At that time, he was part of the transition team. He was allowed to represent the President of the United States. The big question is, when he did that, was he speaking for the president or was he speaking for himself? All I know is this, and I know poor Dave Major back there, we talked about this counterintelligence guy at the FBI, right, pulling his now bald head out. You know, he's been there, right? You've been on the receiving end of somebody's phone call. I don't think that he was an asset. I don't think he was an agent. I think he was an unwitting idiot. And I have since been proven right. I wrote about him in my book. I said he was a dangerous character. He was fired at Defense Intelligence Agency. There was talk over there, I know a sergeant major in Special Forces who worked for him and said that guy was not going to pass his next 5-year clearance update. Okay? Surprise! It wasn't even 5 years. He's already failed twice. He's been fired by 2 presidents. He's proven himself. Now, if anything nefarious went on, I think that's going to come out in investigation.
Okay, let's take one from there, and then we'll come back and one up here.
Wonderful talk. The circles of treason and espionage are not necessarily congruent. My question is about our president. Based on what you know now, what rating from 0, absolutely not, to 100, absolutely, what is your numerical estimate of our President Trump being a traitor?
0. 0. Because to be a traitor, you need to, A, be in a state of declared war. Even though we're in a state of armed conflict, we are not in a state of declared war. 2, he would have to have been a knowing agent of a foreign agency, a foreign government. And he would have to have run specifically to do this, right? Snowden, all right? He doesn't even get the title of traitor, even though he did what is rhetorically called treason. He has not technically done treason, right? Because we still need that declared war. Let's get that off the table. Now, optically, does this look good? Right? Vladimir Putin's your buddy. He's your pooty poot, right? No, doesn't look good. Now, can I say he was an unwitting? I agree with Mike Morrell, former deputy director of the agency, where he says he was an unwitting asset. He called him an unwitting agent. He's not an agent. He's an asset. Unwitting. I believe at this moment, whoops, how do you go backwards on this thing? Well, that slide where I had him quoting Russia, if you're listening, I believe he became aware that they were working in his interest. The question is, he had better pray to God that the 4 people that are being investigated or anybody else are not, are you back there? Just one. That one. I believe at that moment he became aware. But he better pray to God that no one on his staff was in communications with them and coordinating this. Because at that point, we will be in Benedict Arnold territory.
Okay, one question here, and then I'll come back to you.
My question has to do with the president and his attacks on the intelligence community. And as citizens, obviously, we're not intelligence officers, but what do we need to know? And obviously, it would be phenomenal for our president not to be doing that. But what do we need to know in terms of any dangers? How does the intelligence community respond to that? Obviously, they're doing their jobs, and in my view, he's casting aspersions of which he has no proof. But I would like to hear from your perspective what we need to be concerned about as citizens.
You know, there's several people in this room. I'd like to hear their opinions on that. I mean, mine is relatively low grade compared to people like Peter and, Melissa. But you can cast aspersions as president of the United States on the intelligence community. Every president has cussed these guys out, right? They cussed you out before, right? So, but by doing that, that doesn't mean that you degrade the intelligence process or demeaned have stopped the work of the people who are doing this on a day-to-day basis. Those people are dedicated. I mean, I feel it deeply in my heart when I speak about the community. They go in there and they do a job that no one's ever going to really know about, day in, day out, and they live for the mission of keeping you safe, right? The president, he's going to have to deal with the optics of insulting people that are keeping him safe, keeping his family, his wife, and his kids safe. And I don't know, no one is holding anything back from him. The presidency is at a stratospheric level. He's going to get things like, things are bad in Libya, right? But he is not going to get a list of all the real names of all of our assets in Libya. There's no chance of him compromising that. Now, if he asked for that, people would be rather suspicious, and they'd be saying, you know, even the president doesn't have a need to know some things. He can ask for it, he can order it, but I don't think that that's going to be our issue. Our issue isn't that he's possibly, wrapped up in this nefarious thing and now they're compromising people and people are being killed in other countries. No, stupid decisions does that. We've got a long history of presidents that have made really dumb decisions and have ignored very clear intelligence. And, you know, that's all we can say. One more?
Yes, right here. Thank you.
Those poor people back there.
I'm a big fan. I've been following you on Twitter since before the election. I'm a total news junkie. I find this fascinating.
You know, I've only been on Twitter 10 months.
I've been following.
I just figured out the Twitter machine.
So I have a couple questions. So we know, based on reporting, that Paul Manafort, Carter Page, Roger Stone, and potentially others were definitely communicating with Russians before the election. We don't know what those communications were. Let's assume that the FBI confirms the communications were about, hey, we're going to get rid of sanctions in exchange for you guys releasing these Hillary emails that you hacked, maybe on our behest, or that we asked you to hack, that type of thing. Let's prove that's all true. Let's prove that Trump and his shell companies receive Russian money, which other people have been reporting on that. If that's all true, Comey, who just briefed, you know, the Senate last week in a confidential briefing, if Comey knows that Trump and maybe Bannon and others who are currently in the White House, who currently have access to secure information, were essentially colluding with Russia for months or maybe years before the election, what can he do to prevent them from destroying evidence or from taking steps with Russia from the White House in affecting our security? Does he go to Congress?
Okay,
Does he go to
thank
the press?
you.
I'll tell you.
Yeah.
First off, you know, everybody is of two minds about Jim Comey. Jim Comey did some amazing things in the Bush administration. He really stood up to the president when he was being railroaded to do bad things, like validate torture. I think that, first let me clear up the Hillary things. I think that he was pressured politically to release stuff about Hillary. You know, that thing. He didn't think that that was going to be a big thing. But there's one thing I know. No, you don't think so? All right, whatever. Politics is politics. Okay. Talk to him if you want to talk about the FBI, because that guy knows. But I really think that Jim Comey won't open his mouth at all about anything which involves a counterintelligence investigation. There is not going to be any of this, I'm going to leak this and see how it floats. If there's something out there, oh, you're going to know about it, because this is going to be a national crisis on an enormous scale. We have to let it play out. I do not think this story is going away ever. And this isn't a conspiracy theory. Activities are occurring. I cannot use the New York Times as a valid source of information. That's rumit. But it does give us indicators towards what's happening in the nation. And if those 4 people come out, you're going to see indictments of some type. It's not going to be the Espionage Act. It's not going to be treason. It could be conspiracy. All right? It could be some other disclosure of activities. So there you have it. Are we overdue?
Okay.
One more.
Why don't we take,
I hope that answered your question.
take another question? Let me take 2 questions. I know there was late. Amanda, right back there. And then one over here.
Bulgaria. All right. I'll take 2. I've got time. You just don't have time.
Thank you. I have a question for you about a legal argument that I saw a report of at the end of January. A writ of mandamus was filed before the Supreme Court to throw out the election. And the argument is using Article 4, Section 4, saying that this equates to an invasion. And I'm wondering what you think of that argument of a cyber territory being invaded is the same as land territory being invaded.
Yeah, that group wrote to me and asked me to sign on to that effort. And I think it's interesting, all right? But I didn't think, and I said this very clearly, I didn't think it had a snowball's chance in hell, all right? Because, you know, the Founding Fathers, these are the times to go back and read books like The Debate of the Constitution. And, you know, they are brilliant. Those guys were like the pinnacle of the Enlightenment. Everything they did holds up, right? And I can see them now. If you get George Mason and Thomas Jefferson and these guys, and you go, listen. In the future, copy. In the future, there's going to be this world that doesn't exist, right? And we're going to call it cyberspace. And you can see Franklin sitting there going, oh, you mean the ether? Yeah. Okay. It's a world of dreams that are connected through electricity. And they'd all be going, yeah, we copy that. No, that's not an invasion. You put troops on the ground, we can understand that, right? Invasion through cyberspace, come back in 240 years and try again, because it's not going to fly with us.
Okay. All right, we're going to take the last. You have a couple of extra tickets to Hamilton, don't you?
I wish to God I had one.
We'll take the last
Leave my wife behind.
Can we quote you on that?
No, she's already heard it.
So I heard you on television a couple of times. Can you speak to the deep state? I mean,
yeah.
How is that? I mean, what is it? Can we trust it? Are they going to be the ones to make sure that everything comes out like it's supposed to? I mean, on Twitter, you see all of these people tweeting all of this crazy information. Who do we believe? And do I need to go climb under a table somewhere?
No. Look, here's who you can believe. If I say this phrase all the time on television. I say, I don't like to use technical intelligence terms, but that's crazy. And if I say it's crazy, it's mean that I have already common sense checked it. If it sounds crazy, it's probably crazy. The deep state, I don't like that term at all. I'm going to tell you what the true technical definition of what people call the deep state is. It's called the government. And it's the bureaucracy. If that's the case, the GSA, right? The General Services Administration is the deep state. No, they are just the people who keep your checks coming. They're the people who keep regulations going. And they're the people who have to stand lazy watch shifts in the middle of the night over at the National Counter-Terrorism Center and try to keep their head from banging off their keyboards. Right? I was part of the deep state. We are all part of the deep state at one point because we are the workers that run the government. Get rid of that phrase. That's an InfoWars crazy terminology for the people that, you know, bring you water, power, and electricity.
Please join me in thanking our guest speaker again today for a terrific talk. Yeah, it was really great.